Jami-Lee Ross.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As we near the end of this debate and we've had to listen to the Labor Party whinging and whining because they don't like hearing the truth, and they've had to listen to the truth for the last 2.5 hours, I'd like to tell the Labor Party that failure is an option. Failure is an option because at 30% in the opinion polls, the Labor Party has chosen failure. We know the Labor Party has chosen failure because they keep David Shearer on, they see their polling ratings going down the drain, and they have no hope of getting back into office at the next election. Because, Mr Speaker, New Zealanders appreciate the economic plan that this government is following. New Zealanders appreciate the growth rates that we're seeing in this economy. They appreciate the extra jobs that are being created in New Zealand, and they don't appreciate what the Labor Party stands for. I hear David Cunliffe has just woken up, and I know why he's woken up. He's woken up because tomorrow the Labor Party leader is getting rolled. The only thing for Mr Cunliffe he needs to worry about is it's not happening here in New Zealand. It's probably happening in Australia. But Mr Cunliffe is excited because he's inspired at the moment. He's inspired by the low opinion poll rates. He's inspired by what Kevin Rudd's doing across the ditch, and he's hoping that someday Labor Party members will be circulating a petition on his behalf. But, Mr Speaker, the reason why they're going to have to start circulating those petitions is because New Zealanders know that we're succeeding as a country on the back of economic growth and budgets that this party has been passing. Let me give the other side some numbers, because it's important that we drum this home. It's important that we remind them how well we're actually doing as a country. At the moment, after-tax wages are up 22%. That's huge considering the global financial crisis that New Zealand's been through. Our economic growth rates are currently sitting at 2.4%. That's better than most developed countries in the world. Ruth Dyson doesn't like to hear it. She thinks it's made up. But actually, Ruth Dyson, let me tell the Labor Party and the other side of the House that we're growing faster than the US, we're growing faster than Canada, faster than the UK, the Eurozone. David Cunliffe would never have achieved this, because Phil Goff and David Cunliffe didn't even know their figures at the last election. They would never have achieved this. We're growing faster than the UK, growing faster than the US, growing faster than the Eurozone. And after the back of a global financial crisis and a Labor Party leadership that saw the economy starting to tank in 2008 when they were in office, we know that these are good growth rates. And, Mr Speaker, unemployment is actually doing quite well at the moment too. At 6.2%. At 6.2%, that's better than most developed countries at the moment. We've got a lower unemployment rate than Canada, the US, the UK, lower than the OECD total. Mr Speaker, lower than France, Italy, Ireland, Portugal, Greece and Spain. And it's those two at the end that we have to think carefully about, Greece and Spain. Because if the other side ever got into government, we know that we would have a similar story to Greece and Spain, because the Labor Party is the anti-growth party. The Labor Party is the anti-growth party that doesn't support New Zealanders. They're the anti-growth party with their mates in the Green Party that would be taxing New Zealanders a huge amount. They'd be spending huge amounts more than otherwise is necessary. They'd be putting in more red tape on New Zealand businesses. They'd be putting more red tape on New Zealanders that are just trying to get ahead. And, Mr Speaker, that would be anti-growth. They like to tell the country that they care about manufacturing. They like to tell the country that it's in a crisis and they're going to have the solutions for it. The only crisis when it comes to manufacturing is the leadership and the examples and the story we're getting from the Labor Party. Because, Mr Speaker, since 2008, the manufacturing sector as a whole has grown by 9.2%, as measured by GDP by industry. When Labor was in office in 2008, the manufacturing sector actually shrunk by 12%. Now, I heard William Seo wake up. Let me tell you about William Seo. I spent 3 years on the Manukau City Council with William Seo. Every time there was a policy and an option to increase rates and increase spending, William Seo was always there. He was always there to spend more money. He was always there to tax the good people of Manukau more. He never cared about trying to cut costs. trying to get rates down. He never cared about sensibly balancing the council's books. He was always wanting to spend more money. And if William Seo and his mates on the other side ever occupy this side of the House, we'd see those types of policies. We'd see a whole lot more spending, we'd see a whole lot more debt, we'd see a whole lot more anti-growth policies from Labor. Let me give them a couple of numbers. 60 and 20. Those numbers are worth remembering because under the economic plan left by the Labor Party, in 2020, we would have seen debt reaching 60% of GDP. Under our plan, debt in 2020 will be at 20% of GDP. Now, if the other side doesn't think that's significant, I can tell you that New Zealanders out there who care about debt, who care about the economic situation this country's in, know that 60% of GDP sitting there on the debt books is bad. They know that Labor would have pushed hard for that. They know Labor would have succeeded in that area, raising the debt up to 60% of GDP. That would have been very destructive for New Zealanders. And, Mr Speaker, that's why the anti-growth, anti-New Zealand Labor Party should be kept out of the government benches and shouldn't be allowed near it. And we know that the Green Party has now artificially said they'll be abandoning the printing of the money. But do we actually believe that? Do we actually believe that the Green Party won't be printing money? Because about the only way that the Labor-Green opposition could ever pay for their policies is to print more money. And, Mr Speaker, that would be disastrous for New Zealanders. I want to talk a little bit about New Zealand's housing situation, because I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty excited about what this government's doing in housing, because in Auckland right now we have a huge housing problem that we need to address quite quickly. And I would have hoped that the Labor Party would have got on board with our housing plan, because the housing accord and the special housing area policy that's being put in place as part of this government's economic plan is going to see housing really take off around the country, especially in Auckland. Especially in Auckland, where we need a lot more housing, where we need a lot more growth, and we need a government that will be there assisting New Zealanders. That's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. Because in New Zealand, under the special housing area policy that's part of our economic plan that Nick Smith is pushing forward, we're going to see 39,000 houses built in the next 10 years. The next 3 years, sorry. 39,000 houses built in the next 3 years. That's almost a quadrupling of the housing that has been built in the past few years. And, Mr Speaker, that'll have huge impacts for New Zealanders. In the health area, we've got a fantastic story, because Tony Rowell is really a health minister that any future health minister should be modelling themselves on. Not Annette King. Maggie Barry was absolutely right today when she said Annette King was one of the worst health ministers we've seen in 50 years, because Tony Rowell is the model. Tony Rowell is the model, because in health we've had 35,000 more elective operations. 35,000 more elective operations in this year compared to 2008. 8,000 extra operations every year. Oh, I'm a bit concerned about Trevor Mallard. We know he likes to attack police officers. We know he likes to threaten their jobs. He's probably wishing he could do that to me right now. But I'm not part of the police, Trevor Mallard. And Trevor Mallard, you should stick to what you're good at, threatening police officers, because that's about all he's good for. Mr Speaker, health, education, we're seeing huge improvement in policies. We know that New Zealand is growing. We know that jobs are being created in the economy. We know that the unemployment rate is on the way down. We know that New Zealanders are supporting what we're doing. We know that New Zealanders appreciate the growth that's happening in the country. They appreciate the National-led government. Let's hope the anti-growth, pro-money printing parties on that side of the bench, that side of the House, never get into government.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
3 short minutes to take apart what that member thinks is